Okay, so the first market that we talk about is going to be perfect competition. So if you recall, that was at the end of the spectrum where there's very little market power. So we're going to remind ourselves, we're going to say perfect competition. And again, I'm going to say this is something pretty theoretical. There are hardly any examples of the things that are at the two extremes. And perfect competition is really a lot more elusive than anything else, because we have many firms in the market. We have identical goods. And we have no barriers, right? Anybody can join this market. So we said, therefore, no market power, right? So then we are a price taker. Right, so the price of our good, of our identical good that is the same as everybody else's, is going to be determined by the supply and demand forces in the market, and we're not going to have anything to say about it. Once again, if I were to raise my price even a nickel, my products are identical. Lots of people sell this stuff. I don't want it. Nobody wants to pay the extra nickel. So all the market power lies with the consumer. The individual firm doesn't have any power. Okay, we're not going to talk about situations of collusion or people getting together and making illegal agreements in order to manipulate the price. That's a totally different thing. Perfect competition is going to be absent of all of that. Now, one other thing we need to talk about here is that the consumer has perfect information. Perfect information, right? Once again, must be an artificial construct, because whenever you see this word perfect, we're going to think of an ideal state. So perfect information. So not only are there lots of firms selling identical goods and anybody could join the market, but the consumers are aware of all this stuff. You know, and that's needed because the demand is completely changeable depending on any of these factors changing. So, you know, I'm shopping at one store for my butter, but I know that at another store they're charging $5.50, so I'll just go down the road to that store that's selling it for $5.50 as opposed to $6, whatever it happens to be. So consumers have perfect information, and that's what facilitates this perfect competition. Right? So we're going to see a market. We're going to see a market dictating the price. So here's our price, here's our quantity, and this is in the market generally, market for whatever this good is, the perfectly competitive market, and we're going to have a downward sloping demand curve, and we're going to have an upward sloping supply curve, and those are going to converge at an equilibrium price and quantity, right? Now, the normal things are going to apply here, right? Like within this market, you know, if a lot of firms leave the market, then you're going to have the prices going up. You're going to have the supply curve shifting this way. If there's a whole bunch more demand, you're going to see, you know, if incomes go up, it's a normal good, you're going to see the demand curve shift up. You're going to get your fluctuations in the market. But anyone who tries to charge a price higher is going to wind up with more stuff then people will demand, so we'll eventually cut the price until we get here. This is basic stuff that we studied in chapter 3. So that's how we come to our price. Now, we're going to use some of the principles of chapter 7 in order to understand this. So we're going to put dollars on this axis and then the quantity of production. So I'm using a lowercase q to indicate that this is the firm, right? This is the firm. And so what we learned in the last in the last section was that we have a marginal cost curve. The cost of things is going to initially go down and then it's going to go up, right? And then we also have our average cost curve that is going to be something like this: average total cost, right? Our average variable cost is going to be down here, and our average fixed cost, of course, is going to go down over the scale of production. But if we can look at this right now, so we see that our marginal cost is continually climbing, our average total cost, that's not really going to differ firm to firm, right? It doesn't matter what market we're in, how these costs are going to behave. And we learned that in chapter 7, right? There is going to be a scale of production where we're going to be at the lowest average total cost, right? The lowest cost per unit. But this is not going to change. But all firms are going to basically behave this way. They're going to have some fixed cost, they're going to have some variable costs, and each unit is going to cost them a little bit more. So they're going to have marginal costs as well. Now, what we want to add for this is the demand curve that the firm itself will be facing, right? So the demand curve is just, how much we're going to be able to sell, how much consumers are going to demand at each price. And really, that's just going to be a flat line. It's actually going to be right here, right where our price is. So I'm trying to make these the same. So this is going to wind up being the marginal revenue, right? The marginal revenue being the revenue gained by selling each unit, and it's going to be completely flat, right? Because I said here before that we are a price taker. So it doesn't matter what quantity we want to produce, we're only ever going to be able to get the market price for it. So, unless there is a change in the market, this is going to be our demand curve, which is equal to our marginal revenue. This is also going to be equivalent to our average revenue, our revenue per unit, right? It's always going to be the price dictated by the market. We're going to find out later that that's not true in all market forms, but that is definitely true in perfect competition. Because of all of these things, we can't have any influence on the price. So our demand curve that we face is going to be right here, right? And then we have a magic formula which we all want to tattoo on the inside of our eyelids, which is that profit, right? Profit is the, really why we run a business. Now, remember that we're talking about economic profit as opposed to accounting profit. So we're talking about profit that includes all of our opportunity costs. We did that very early in the course as well. So, the foregone salary that we would have earned if we had been in our job will all be rolled into that. So that's going to be, we're talking about economic profit. And I'm going to shorten that when I talk about it in this unit by using the pi symbol for profit. right? So the profit is just going to be, it is basically revenue minus expenses. Revenue minus expenses. So your total revenue, total revenue minus total cost. Well, that's going to be equal to price times the quantity minus average total cost times the quantity, right? Or if you will, it's going to be price minus average total cost times quantity, right? Okay, so here's our price, right? And our, I think we discussed in the last chapter that at every stage up to here, up to this point, as long as the marginal revenue is higher than the marginal cost, there is additional profit to be gained from producing each unit as we go along here. So see, your marginal cost is less than your marginal revenue. The amount it costs us for the additional unit is less than what our revenue is. So up until this point here, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, this is going to be the profit maximizing point. Right? Here it is. And that's going to be also true regardless of what our form of a market is. Let's put it right here. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So that is always going to be the point of the quantity at which we maximize our profit. So this is going to be, the quantity with the highest possible profit. So we're always, depending on, regardless of our firm or how this marginal revenue curve looks, it doesn't matter. We're going to produce up to the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And remember that, because that's very key to understanding all of these examples as we go through these markets. And look, right at that point, as we said, in a perfectly competitive firm, you can sell as many as you want, but you're only ever going to get the price. So we have a perfectly elastic demand curve, and that is also our average revenue. So our average revenue, so we could put that here, average revenue or price, doesn't matter. We're going to use that, and then our average revenue is right here, and our average total cost is right here. So right in here is where we see our profit. Okay. So let's leave it at that for this video. I'm going to start another video where we're going to explain some more things. But just what we want you to know for perfect competition is these characteristics mean that we're taking the price from the market. So we're doing a perfectly flat demand curve, which is also our marginal revenue curve. We're looking for the point where our marginal revenue equals our marginal cost. That is going to be our quantity of production. And then the average cost minus the average total cost times the quantity. This is going to be your profit, right? This is going to be your total revenue, incidentally, your price times your quantity. This rectangle here is going to be your total revenue. Total revenue. This is going to be your total cost from this line down to here, and then right in here, let's mark it in red, that's going to be your profit. So take the time to understand what's going on with this graph so far, and then I'm going to start another video to show you through a few more things and what is going to happen in a market Because you see, we feel as if a perfectly competitive market is going to have a certain result for all firms and for the market generally, that element of perfect competition. And we're going to demonstrate that here in the next video. Oh.